Follow all safety procedures before attempting any repair. To be a part of the show, call 866-594-4150. Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is not here this week, but Shannon Nordstrom is.
Welcome, Hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up. Maybe not as much if Russ was here, but we're going to give it a shot.
That's true. We have, as I've said in weeks past, we now have an open spot, so we have more room for callers, more room for questions.
Did you say that when I was gone, too? Like, are you referring to an open spot as in, like, you're taking applications?
No, just that we have one less person to fill the airwaves, so we have more room to take calls.
I took that maybe the other way.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I didn't mean it that way.
But
that's a fair...
Because I was gone for 2 weeks, and I would have seen you guys wondering if maybe you should consider something like that.
And then I was gone for a week.
Yeah.
It's been a riotous few weeks here on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150. I'm Chris Carter here to take your calls. What's caught your attention in the automotive world?
Well, you know what? We have been busy at our place with dismantling some late model Corvettes, and so that's been interesting to watch. We've done that before, but we've got a little run of them we're working on right now with the C8 Corvettes. And I was walking through the office the other day, and it was my mom's 80th birthday recently, and we celebrated in a grand way here at the business. She was the one that originally had the idea for the Under the Hood show, and that was in 1990 when we first had the idea for this show. But in her office was another one of the plates that we found on the bottom side of the car, a cover reinforcement between two aluminum rails that had an Easter egg on it of the founder of the Corvette, which I was about ready to say the founder of Mount Rushmore, but I was going to say Gutzon Borglum.
Yeah, different. Yeah.
But no, it's another guy that I can't say his name right
With
now.
a Z, though, right?
Zorro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
if you'd asked me an hour ago, I might have come up with
when
it.
my brain does that, and then I look at you and I can't do it, it's bad. But anyway, there's another one of those plates laying on her desk, and it just reminded me of all the fun that the manufacturers have when they build the vehicles. The engineers do have a sense of humor, and they do have a little bit of pride, and you'll find these little Easter eggs hidden, especially in a lot of the specialty vehicles. And if we've listened to the show, we've talked about this before, but it was definitely interesting. And I think on the engine of some of these cars, on the Z06 motors and things like that, I believe they've got little Geminis on them. It was Project Gemini, and there's little Gemini rockets all over them. I mean, they
gave the Corvettes to the Gemini astronauts.
Yeah, they just got so many little things that they do. And I remember the Raptor had a T-Rex that it was devouring, or vice versa. I mean, just trying to play the games with the rivaling manufacturers, and that's just fun to see that stuff. So
I remember when Jeep came out with
17
the
Wrangler.
Liberty.
Well, no, it was when we did the test on
you're
going back further yet.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the Liberty. Was that the little one? The little
smaller Jeep. Yeah,
they came. I remember this because it didn't make people happy. They came out and said, "We've put all these Easter eggs on the Liberty. You can go look for them." And then they put a website up where there were some where you could look here, and if you looked from a certain angle, it was the Jeep logo. And some people were upset that they let it out that there were these Easter eggs to look for instead of letting people find them. I just remember that was a topic of conversation, that they blew the whole game, and then people could go find them elsewhere.
Well, and the Easter eggs have been used for a couple of reasons. One is, having some fun, marketing, conversation on the blogs, the enthusiasts to really get excited about stuff. That's one reason that they do it, and pride of engineers and putting their stamp on things. But another reason that's become very prevalent is for patent reasons.
Right.
They'll take a new Denali or a new Ford truck or whatever, and you'll find those Super Duty embossed logos or the GM Denali logo inside the headlight, on a panel inside the headlight, just so that they have unique copyright patent rights to that part.
Right.
It makes it very difficult for somebody to make a copy that's identical with that, kind of when they start putting some of their name brands on them. You see the embossed tailgates that are stamped. I look back to even the old Pontiac Bonnevilles back in the day, where they'd have Bonneville or SSEI in the bumper cover. That made that a part that was very difficult for somebody to rightfully make a knockoff overseas. Very interesting stuff. So it was reminding me of that again when I saw that sitting on my mom's desk, because I've been just laying them all on her desk because she loves that stuff, and she's probably got a friend in the Corvette Club or something she can share it with. So
866-594-4150. Let's go to Georgia right out of the gate and talk to Bob. You're on the Under the Hood Show, Bob. What can we do for you?
Hey, good morning. I have a 97 Accord. It runs great. Everything's great about it, but I was making a right turn the other day, and my dash light flickered fast, which means a burned out bulb someplace, usually.
Typically,
and
that's gonna be the result. Yep.
Yeah, but I wish it were, but it's not. I checked my lights later, and I found the rear ones were working good, but the right one's not working at all. So I got the bulb out. It looked new, and I tested the bulb, and it tested good. What now? I think I have a wiring problem.
Well, a lot of times what can happen on those, if people are not, if you have one that goes bad, you can see them sometimes when they're actually bad but still crossed on the filament, or good working but still crossed on the filament a little bit to make them short. And then also you can get a problem in the socket itself, where it'll create enough resistance inside the socket or the wiring pigtail up to the socket that it just makes it not work as it's supposed to. And another thing we've run across a lot of times when people call the show and at our own shop is where someone else previous had put in an LED replacement. Now, I'm not saying that in your case. I'm just using that as a point to bring it up. But if you put in an LED replacement that's not the correct matching resistance to the original, it can make the circuit think that it's not working and give you that fast blink just the same. And so most of the time when that happens, it's going to be your pigtail. Now, when you watch the light outside, I guess I didn't catch this. Maybe I'll backtrack. Was the light physically blinking, or it's not blinking?
It's not blinking.
Okay, so it's not working.
It doesn't come on.
And you're getting a fast blink. What happens when you turn on the hazard lights? Do those same lights not blink?
They are different lights, and they blink fine.
Okay. Brake lights, everything else seems to work fine?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually took that bulb out and put 12 volts on it, and it works fine.
Yep. Well, then they do have the switch that's on the column is probably your next place for your failure, that it's got a problem with those contactors. That's the next, I'd call it exposed or moving part, which is usually the ones that you look at. And if you don't find any degradation in the wiring back there, maybe to the bulb itself at the socket, or the harness where it comes up from under the body, a lot of times where it kind of works its way up into the body. A lot of times they run those through the inside and they come in through the trunk and they're never exposed to the elements. And in this car, I think that might be the case, but I'm giving that advice just for other people that might be listening. Always want to check that wiring where if it's exposed anywhere to the environment coming up through. And I think on that car, I'm pretty sure they run that from the inside. But I would just check all those connections. They got those Hondas got those nice little white fun to click connections on the back of their light packs. But you might just pull that whole light out and just double check that connection to the look at all the pins. Just really inspect things close, put it back together, and just see if maybe it's that. But if not, you might be looking back towards that switch on the column.
Does that help you out there?
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the call.
Thanks very much for the call.
Yeah, those can be kind of a bugger, and there's probably some Honda enthusiasts out there that are listening. And if you could call in and say, no, when that happens, it's this.
Right.
But from general experiences, that's what you run across.
Zora.
Well, thank you
is
for
the name.
Thank you for backtracking on that.
That came up on the chat. Edward on the chat said it's Zora.
Yeah, because I said Zorro, and that's a whole different deal.
But close though, real close. That's pretty darn close.
You know what? This is one of them things that I have had problems with in the past, and I should not even have went there. knowing that there was a chance for me making just a major blunder on that.
I think you were close enough. I mean, you were close enough that it was worth it.
But did I say it fast enough? I could have got away with it if I wouldn't have covered.
Well, you screwed that up by saying
I could have just said Zor, and it just kept going.
Z for his name.
Yeah,
and then stopped at that.
Got some Zora.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. The phone number to reach us, 866-594-4150.
Be sure to visit our website for news, contests, and previous shows at underthehoodshow.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get back under the hood with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Now, let's go to John. You're on the Under the Hood Show. John, what can we do for you?
Got a 2013 Duramax with a 6.6 3500. The other day when I was driving it, it sounded like the exhaust kind of fell off under the hood. It started getting louder and louder. And within about 5 miles, I had to pull over and stop because it just was running like crap and got really loud. And I don't see nothing wrong, but I don't know nothing about it either.
So were you able to continue to drive it, or did it derate it and not let you drive any further and you had to get towed, or what was the rest of that story?
Yeah, I got it towed. It lost power when it started getting loud, and then it just started sounding really bad, so I just parked and got it towed. I probably could have drove it, but it wasn't running right and didn't sound good.
How many miles are on this big bad Duramax?
110,000.
Very low mileage for that age. I mean, is it kind of your baby?
Well, no, it's just a work pickup.
Okay, all right. Well, a lot of times when you get them where they're getting loud like that on a diesel, you many times can relate it to a fuel issue where it's not getting the right fuel flow, and then it starts to just really, it can make some hammering noises sometimes even that gets really loud. Now, the fact that you called it exhaust, it's very uncommon for those to have intercooler problems. That's not an issue. It's usually something to do with the fuel delivery, the high pressure injection pump if it was starting to fail. That's where you're going to get some of those louder noises as it starts to misfire and just cavitate and not get the right fuel into the cylinders. But what's your next step typically? Do you have a go-to diesel shop, or are you one of the guys that says, you know what, I do this stuff myself and I figure it out?
I'm just going to take it to a shop. I think that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, then the first thing they're probably going to want to do, have you tried to start it again since you got back or to where it was towed from? Or did you have it towed right to the shop?
I towed it right to the shop. I was only a mile away.
Oh, there you go.
So.
You'll see stuff like this where it'll do something, and then you'll get back and you'll start it, and it just fires right up and purrs like a kitten. You're like, oh, just drive you crazy. So I didn't know if you had tried that or not yet.
Nope, I haven't.
Because that would be the Chris Carter repair at that point.
I was just going to say, good move on pulling over and having it towed.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't do that, would you?
I'd try to go.
Yeah.
But at some point with those diesels, they're so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If they're broken and they're not working right, the dollar cost to repair them is everything's times 5 when you repair a diesel like that.
So the quicker you can get to the problem.
Right, and then not extend the problem. I hope it wasn't. Were you towing or anything at the time, or doing anything strenuous on, or just driving?
I just had an empty trailer on.
Yeah, so no extra heavy load of any sort.
Earlier in the day I did, but not at that time, no.
Yeah, because when you start talking about loudness, maybe something come apart on the exhaust. You'd see that though. You'd see a flange that's come apart. You'd be physically able to see those things. Then they got to look into the engine itself and make sure that it didn't open up a cylinder or have a problem. But I don't think so. I bet they're going to find a problem, and it's going to be a fuel delivery issue of some sort, and might cost you a little bit of money. But as long as it's still replicating the problem, a good diesel shop with these Duramaxes being around for so many years, they'll be right on top of that, and you'll have to report back to see what you actually found. I can't give you an over the phone on that one, but I'm going to guess it's a fuel delivery problem.
Okay.
There you go, John. Thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Does that cause that loud
Well, you can get a diesel that can make some crazy noises when they start misfiring on the fuel. And usually on the modern diesels, they just will eventually just not run, and they'll protect themselves when those sort of things start happening. You have, I've seen them where they'll break components inside, and then that's really loud, of course. But
Sure.
I just don't. He didn't sound like the problem was anything where he felt like it was that dramatic. He said exhaust coming off, and it just makes me sound like it maybe would have been a way different noise to him. If it was doing a misfire situation, and it resonates through that exhaust because they've got such big exhaust on them. A lot of times they're running a 2 3/4 to 3 3/4 inch pipe on those things, and so you've got a lot of activity and a lot of resonation that can really amplify a misfire under fueling.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Rich. You're on the Under the Hood show. Rich, what can we do for you?
Well, I have a 95 Mustang, and it has about 72,000 miles on it. And it hasn't been driven very much, obviously, and I took it out a couple weeks ago, and it was sitting in my driveway idling, and then all of a sudden it just started running really poorly. And so I went and I got some better gas for it. And I noticed when I was going down to get to the gas station, the transmission wouldn't shift anymore now. And with gas in it, I still couldn't get the transmission to shift. And so I thought, well, I'd change the fluid and filter in the transmission. I went and bought some stuff and parked the car, and the next morning I went and got into it to go change the fluid and filter, and it was running perfectly. Transmission shifted all the way to where I was going. Changed the filter and oil, took off again, wouldn't shift again. Ran like crap again. Where do I go?
Well, first, after you get done screaming a little bit,
Yeah.
Make some noises. There'll be some noises. It sounds to me that there's a good chance that car is old enough that you don't have a lot of electronics, but it's new enough that it's got a few.
Mm-hmm.
You're right on the edge of when they started doing the OBD2. That's a 5.0 in that one?
Yes, it is.
And just a 4-speed automatic AOD transmission, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, if it was a more modern car, I'd really lean towards an electrical gremlin, and it still could be. How do you store that as far as your battery? You keep a maintainer on it, or do you take the battery out? What do you do?
I used to unhook the battery, but the last couple of years I've been putting a maintainer on it.
All right, and all your connections would have been unchanged from last year then, and they still look good, and you don't have any ground wires from the battery or extra power leads that would have been accidentally disconnected or loose or not completely reseated. You should have left that all the same as last year then at that point, correct?
It was, as far as I know. It's in Florida, so it's pretty highly corrosive air.
Yeah, and is there
even though it sits in a garage?
Exactly. Is there any sort of check engine lights or flashing transmission buttons or anything you got going on while it's making these problems?
I think the check engine light came on. I'm like you mentioned it.
Yeah, if that stays on, that would be obviously a great clue for a mechanic to be able to say, all right, here's where this is coming from.
Right.
But when you got two systems like that, I still kind of wonder about the power. Not that I would recommend this a lot, but that car's of an age I don't think you're going to cause any problems. But I would try taking the battery and disconnecting it all. Check your battery. Even if it means taking it down to your local parts store and having them put it on their nice electronic tester, if you don't have one yourself, so they can check the internal of the battery and see if just make sure it's 100% and you got good voltage, good power supply. Put it back in and just see if any of that stuff happens just to reset itself after sitting. It shouldn't have been a problem if you kept a maintainer on it, but sometimes that can happen. And if it comes back and it does the same thing again, then you're going to have somebody get in there and check that thing out. And like I said, that 95, I think, is the first year of OBD2, so they should be able to scan that pretty easily and find out what system that's coming from.
I had a moment there where I was like, man, that car's already 20 years old. No, it's 30.
Yeah. It's a Berkeley classic for sure.
For sure.
So it's probably what color? Don't tell us yet. What color? Chris?
I'm going to say it is white.
I'm going to say it is in Florida. It's probably the blue color. What color was your car, Rich?
It's turquoise.
I'll give that.
I get a half a point for that.
For sure.
Ta-ting.
Rich, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Find out how you can participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us at the Under the Hood Show. Maybe down in Florida, he could take his car to a Universal Technical Institute campus or graduate to get his Mustang looked at.
Yeah, they'd probably enjoy seeing that and, saying the classic down there with a little bit of horsepower under the hood. Back in the day that Mustang came out, that was a powerful vehicle. And if I go look at the specs on that, I'm going to guess that horsepower was probably in the 230 horsepower range.
Yeah.
That's you might want to go maybe 210, 205. Maybe you should Google that horsepower of a 95 Mustang GT.
Okay.
And you think about that today where they're regularly putting out V6 cars with 270 horsepower, V8s with regularly 400 and 500 horsepower. It's just, four-cylinder turbos with more horsepower than that V8. It's just kind of crazy. But yeah, the crews at Universal Technical Institute, they've got campuses all over the country, teaching people those skills that they need to be able to succeed in the automotive world. And they are the premier institution, and they make it affordable. There's financing options available for people, and it doesn't matter whether you're a recent graduate or a person reigniting your career. It's a great place to go check it out at Universal Technical Institute.
And you would want to get that insured with our partners at Berkeley One Classics.
You bet. Got the full suite of rollout there of partners.
240 horsepower.
Oh, that's just a little short.
Yeah, there you go. What the 94 Mustang was 145 to 240 through there.
What about the 95?
Range. Is that what it was?
It was a 95. So
there
was a change there in 95.
You could have just glossed over that.
No, that's all right though. But I'm guessing the automatic and manual had different horsepower too.
Same. 145, 240.
Okay.
That's the range there.
All right.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Jim. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Jim, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I've got an issue with the fuel line, 2003 Corolla, the best car on the planet. And how do you go from the metal to the plastic line?
Well, I know that they make, at our shop, I know the guys have got some special tools to be able to make the correct fittings that hold the high pressure. And I've seen other people that will do the conversions, and they go to like the same type of stuff that a hot rod builder will use with some AN fittings, and they'll get it switched over to some flexible high pressure fuel line to get what they need. And so there's a couple of different methods of repair, but a shop that's done a lot of this stuff will have the right tool to make the right type of fitting. And I'm not going to be the one without Russ here to step in and say exactly what fitting that should be, especially with something as sensitive as fuel. But you do not want to use the wrong line. You want to use a dedicated fuel line and a clamp, not a clamp, but a fitting that is made for high pressure fuel lines, period. Don't mess around with that stuff. But they do make kits to repair those.
But for me, doing a DIY, how can I get around all of that?
I would go down and talk to our partners at AutoZone and just tell them exactly what you're up against and tell them you want the approved DIY method for this problem. You got a line that's rusted out. Is that what you have? Or do you have one that what's the situation?
It was rusted out. I cut it, and now I'm looking to fit it.
Because on that car, I believe you were running actual port injection. So there's, anywhere from 40 to 60 psi of fuel pressure running through that system, and you can't just use a simple clamp. I mean, you've got to be able to get the right sort of barbed fittings that are able to be secured properly, and a hose that can handle that pressure. And they'll have a repair kit available at, if you're in our area, like so this is the Sturtevant stores, or if, out in the country, they're out further out. We got a lot of listeners from all over. The AutoZone stores will have those things. And I would go with their advice for what they have.
Mm-hmm. For sure on that one, because that's one you don't want to get wrong.
No, and I know that's why you called the show, just have me tell you exactly what to get, but I'm not the one on the show when we're all together to be the one to say, go do this.
Right.
But Russ, if he was sitting here, he would tell you exactly what to do, but he's playing Bob the Builder right now. He's actually doing wood construction, so he's just a little more versatile than I am.
And that is something that when you're doing it all the time, you know which way it goes. And
exactly.
But that's an important one to get right.
Yeah,
the DIY is.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you something that's wrong. So I would definitely talk to some of the experts, find out who the experienced parts guy is on the counter that's been around that stuff, and they'll get you set up.
866-594-4150. Let's go to Kansas and talk to Scott. You're on the Under the Hood show, Scott. What can we do for you?
Well, quick question, and then maybe a comment. I have a 74 Duster 318. Pretty much all stock. I mean, we've changed little bits here and there, fuel pump, all that stuff. Just curious. It does have a lifter, I think, ticking right after it starts, and then it'll tick and it'll stop. Is there a better oil? I mean, I'm just using the conventional, 10W40 or so oil that I could use to help that.
Well, with that vehicle, you definitely want to use a oil that's formulated with the ZDDP still in it, or have an additive, because you're at that age where they were not designed for the newer oils that are out there. And I would be buying there's many different ones that they make. I don't, Castrol makes some, Joe Gibbs Racing Oil we'll hear all the time. There's a lot of different things when you start Googling it, oils that are specific for older cars. And I use a Driven in my older Trans Am oil that is made for that. But we also use the Justice Brothers engine tune-up, and we've had good success for that when we get one that is a little bit noisy. If it's a lifter that just is hanging a little bit or collapsed a little bit, we've seen that they can, if something has worked for us, it's been that when we put it in. And even has this engine been rebuilt and freshened up, or is it all pretty original?
I think it's all pretty original. I mean, everything that we've fixed, we've always fixed whatever else was, on the way there. And it was old fuel, the oil pump, everything was original. I did a timing chain last year.
Yeah, I would.
I think it's all.
I would consider, just if that is the case, before you do your next oil change, or maybe just get the car warmed up and just say, I'm going to do an oil change, and do the engine oil system cleaner that will go through with a much stronger cleaning chemicals. And you don't want to leave it in there, but you leave it in for 15 minutes, half hour, and then drain your oil and let that run through the system. That can help some of those lifters that can hang with some of the deposits that can get into them over time. I get a little nervous with some of those older engines. Sometimes you just want to leave them alone so you don't free loose a lot of that stuff that it might take a couple of treatments to clean it up decent. But then I would try the engine oil system tune-up and put in there afterwards, and that could help also to make sure that lifter, if it's going to come back to life, that if it can. But no, definitely look for an oil that is made for an older classic vehicle when you go do your oil changes. I wouldn't just use the conventional oils in that because of the wear on the cam. You got flat tappet cam. You don't have the rollers on there and different things, so it's going to be a much more abrasive situation, and you need that lubricity in there.
And we have.
Okay, I hadn't even thought about it.
Did you say you had a comment about the light from earlier this hour?
Yeah, I had a kind of a crazy thing happen last year. My wife's got a 2009. We found it a year or so ago, 59,000 miles. Great car. Anyway, she came to me and said that the blinker is blinking fast. So I go out there and check it, check the blinker. Blinker's working. Of course, I do the husband thing and think, anyway, that there's nothing wrong with it. Well, the issue ended up being if you would hit the brakes and use the blinker at the same time, it would blink fast.
Okay.
That issue ended up frying the computer and ended up putting a new computer in it, not knowing that it was a bulb issue, and then it just did it all over again.
What model car was that?
It's a 2009 Corolla.
Okay.
Very base.
And
that
so
1.5 or whatever.
which was it a lighting control module, or was it which actual computer did they say it fried?
Well, it ended up that the car would go into limp mode just randomly. And then you could do this, this hack or whatever. You could hit the gas pedal 7 times when the car's off, and then it would start back up and run for about 15 minutes. Get you a little farther, then you'd have to do that little hack all over again. But then I saw on YouTube about this one guy that said that this light bulb thing was an issue, and I remembered, of course, my wife said that the blinker didn't work. So put a new bulb in there, which actually had one in the toolbox. It's crazy. Put it in, and I haven't had an issue with it since.
Very interesting. Yeah, though a lot of times when we have those problems, that's the first thing we tell people to do is go. Even though the bulb may look good, they're cheap. Sometimes just replace the bulb. Just go in there and replace all the bulbs on that side, and also go to the front park lamp, and the front blinker, and replace those if they're accessible, and just try it again. Because we have seen bulbs fail within their own existence, with where the filament gets crossed a little bit, or inside the bulb something happens. But that's usually a cheap first try.
Right. Yeah.
And some people that's what they. It's the last thing they think it is. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it falls back to that.
One more thing before we go, Scott. We're going to ask you a question here in a second. The 74 Duster, that's definitely one we have to get the...
Definitely a Berkeley classic.
Yeah. I'm going to go with one of those... It's going to be one of those colors that are like pearlescent or they're not. It's not a solid color. It's not a.
You got to zone in on a color.
I know. I'm getting there.
You got to zone in on a color.
I'm gonna say it is the gold. The
That's
goldish
what I was gonna
brown.
Say. Okay.
Whatever that.
If you're golden goldish brown, then I'm gonna go with this car is yellow. And yellowish creamish.
Does it have the line on it still? I want to know that too. Scott, what color is the Duster?
It is a blaze yellow, or yellow blaze.
Look at you.
What's going on here?
Shannon, 2 for 2.
And it's still original color. So
is there a stripe? Is there a stripe?
Just
black
lost
stripe.
There's a black stripe?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
You got the stripe.
Yeah, there you go. Scott, thanks very much for the call. That's a sleeper car. That's a car that I don't know that when I was in high school we would have thought it was going to end up being.
Well, you want to get something that you're going to get really embarrassed by the horsepower on. Look up the horsepower on a 74 Duster 318. It's probably like 160 or 170 horsepower, maybe at the most. If I'm wrong, maybe.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty weak.
170.
Yep.
To 225. Also had a 318 CID.
Yeah, that was a 318 he had.
Okay.
So it was a 318.
150 horsepower.
Wow.
A 318 CID 2-barrel V8, 150 horsepower.
Yeah, that's just coming out of that era where they, we went from major horsepower to, whoa, we're making these things too good. We got to settle down a little bit.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. The phone number to reach us, 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Make a radio appointment each week to hear the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's go to Louisiana and talk to Greg. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Greg, what can we do for you?
Good morning. Love the show. Started listening to the podcast about a year ago when my local guy retired from the mechanic business and also retired from doing his podcast. So I was kind of lost. Found you on iTunes, and I am not a car guy by any means. I can barely put gas in the car, but I listen to at least 2 episodes of your show a day. I'm working my way back through, and it's I don't know what it is, but I really enjoy listening. So
Well,
thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. It's humbling to hear that, and that is what we want. We want people to feel comfortable, listen to the show, and like we're talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case today, we're short one person with Russ gone, so Chris and I are talking to each other as we talk to you, trying to work our way through these challenges that people have.
Yes, exactly.
And we're missing a big brain, so it makes it a little more interesting. But I got a little brain that works pretty good most of the time, but it's not what Russ brings to the table. That's for sure. What can we do to help you out down in Louisiana today?
I have an 03 Camry, 2.4 4-cylinder. The car itself has 488,000 miles.
Wow.
On it.
That's how many of those miles have you driven? How many miles have you driven it?
About 388.
Okay.
I bought it at $100K from a buddy of mine. A lot of those miles are highway miles. Probably a little bit more than half for sure. I do a lot of driving. Now, just full disclosure here, at 425, at 473, so that's been like in February of this year, I did put a new motor in it. I actually drove it until it stopped, and literally. So we put a used motor in it that had a used motor that had 75,000 on it, and back at 425,000, I put a used transmission in it. What might not have went the route of the motor if I hadn't, spent a couple grand on a used transmission back in November. So anyway.
That's how it always works, by the way. There's no way around that. That's always how it goes.
Seems how we hear that a lot in life where people call us on our end of life purchasing, where we buy a lot of cars for the self-service yard and for scrap. Our buyer down there, TJ, I know he hears at least 10 times a day, I just put new brakes and exhaust on it, or the tires were just replaced and then the motor blew up, or it's always something like that. It's the nature of the beast. So what do you got? Yeah. What do you got going on now that you've made these choices?
Okay, so I would say the motor currently has probably about 90,000 on it. When we went and did the replacement, we replaced all the coils and all that stuff, water pump, kept my radiator, so on and so forth. But earlier this week, I had a code P0420 pop up, catalyst system efficiency. Now it's a California car, so it's got two cats on it. Back in March of last year, probably at about 425,000, I replaced the cat that's right there on the manifold, or the motor. I don't know if manifold is the correct term or not, but right there, under the hood.
Yeah, they've got an integrated catalytic converter on the exhaust manifold.
Yeah. And it's got one underneath, on the exhaust, somewhere down there, under there. But anyway, so and when I replaced it 14, 16 months ago, whenever it was, it had been throughout the years, I would always get a catalytic code, and my mechanic, who is, I consider, one of the best in town, said, you can replace it. It'll cost you a fortune. Wait until he suggested I wait until I had some symptoms. Well, I waited, all right. I waited until it totally, it totally clogged up and would not go faster than 20 miles an hour. So anyway, we replaced it. So this new one, like I say, at about 425, so about 60,000 miles ago, it really started to use a lot of oil, the engine. It was just getting old, and it was probably using, for the last 6 months of its life, about a quart of oil every 150, 200 miles. It was using a lot. So that's when I decided, well, let's see what's going to happen. We'll just drive it until it stops. So I get this code, 420. I've heard you guys talk about, burning oil, excessive oil, and what it does to the cat and all that. When we replaced the motor back in February, I suggested to my guy, well, why don't we put a new cat on it, since the one that I had a 5-year warranty? Why not just swap it out right then? And he said, well, it looks clean. It shouldn't be a problem. I told him about the oil. He's like, yeah, but we ended up not doing it. So light comes on. I go about 200 miles. The light goes off. And probably for another 200 or so this week, it hasn't come back on. My intention is to go ahead, since the light did come on and gave me that code, and I know it could be something else besides the cat, but at O'Reilly's, on the Veriscan, that was the first thing that came up.
Hey, Greg, we're going to wrap up to the top of the hour here, so I want to ask you, is this affected now how the car runs at all, or when that light comes on, or is it just giving you that warning light and it still seems like it's running okay?
I apologize. I have a habit of rambling. But no, it runs fine.
All right,
but I'm just wondering, so
the exhaust manifold and the catalytic converter that's on there now is the one that was on there with your previous oil burning engine, correct?
Correct, for about probably 60,000 miles.
Yeah, that film that's inside of there that has the catalyst on it, whether it be platinum, palladium, or rhodium, is pretty sensitive, but it's also pretty tough. But if you didn't put on a factory Toyota manifold, which I'm assuming you didn't because they're extremely expensive and people usually don't, they don't have, the aftermarket ones are good. Many of them are 50 states carb legal, some aren't. But they don't have the material on them that the factory ones do, so they don't take as well to abuse if they're getting a bunch of oil run across them. So what it could be happening is that it's right on the ragged edge of, the ability to, what the sensors are seeing, to turn the light on, turn the light off, because it's sensing before that converter, after that converter. And you might just drive it a little bit further, and if it stays off, it might just be a fact that exhaust heating and the cycles of use have just cleaned that a little bit more, and maybe you'll get fortunate and just keep on rolling. A question I have is, when you got your used engine, did it have the manifold converter on it or not? We got just a little bit of time.
We have 5 seconds.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you did what you had to do, because otherwise I would have put the factory Toyota one back on there if that would have been the case. They don't always leave them with. We don't always leave them with. But I would drive it a little bit, and if not, maybe consider an emissions system cleaning and let that burn through. You might get lucky and get that converter back to life.
You're listening to the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show with the Motor Medics, Shannon Nordstrom and Russ the Super Tech Evans. Shannon is an ASE engine and parts specialist, and Russ is an ASE Master Certified Technician with extensive factory drivability training. Join the Motor Medics for fun and free automotive advice with real-world solutions to everyday automotive problems. The Under the Hood Show is heard weekly on this and other great radio stations across the U.S. Find out how you can participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
With Russ Evans, this is Shannon Nordstrom, thanking you for tuning in to the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show. Have a great day, and remember, PTLA.
The opinions heard on this program, based on the many years of experience of Russ and Shannon, are offered for entertainment value only and as a guide to your repair needs. No claim to repair or cause is given or implied. Always consult with your own certified technician and follow all safety procedures before attempting any repair. To be a part of the show, call 866-594-4150. Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is not here on this episode of the Under the Hood Show, but Shannon Nordstrom is.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. 866-594-4150. I did see some kind of big news out of Kia America.
What might that be? Was it an engine? No.
It was, no. Kia America has issued a park outside recall for almost 500,000 model year 2020 to 2020.
That's a big one when they say park outside.
Yeah. Tellurides because of a risk of fire while parked or driving. 462,869 Tellurides. They're advising owners to park their vehicles outside away from other vehicles and structures until the recall repair has been completed. The front power seat motor on the affected vehicles could overheat because of a stuck power seat slide knob, potentially resulting in a fire and increasing the risk of injury. That is not a recall that you would want to issue.
And it's probably going to only be they've had one that it happened to or two that smoldered, and now they've got to go this far, and you'd want them to go this far if that potential is there. So maybe they have a piece of trim that pops loose, holds on the button, doesn't let it release, whatever it might happen to be. It's amazing that isn't hooked to like a module or a computer that would
just shut it down.
Just shut it down at that point, or a relay that would just, boy, that is crazy.
To fix the issue, dealers will install a bracket for the power seat switch back covers.
Yeah, that's what's happening, I bet, is the trim is coming loose, swelling, and it's pushing and not letting the button release.
And replace the knobs. That is... Boy, oh boy.
You gotta get a lift kit for your knobs.
Yeah, I don't want to.
And that's an extremely popular vehicle, too. I mean, that's not the entry level Kia. That is their top of the line sport utility. So they got a little action to do on that one. So pay attention if that's yours. If nothing else, get out and make sure your switches move. Go back and forth and make sure they stay in the center. I would think it'd be your at-home double check.
Have you ever had a vehicle that had a park outside issue like that?
I had some that probably should have been.
Right. Yeah.
When I was younger, we messed around with enough electrical stuff, and people that listen to the show that know that's not my strong suit.
Because I would, if this were on my vehicle, I would definitely park outside, unless.
What if you were somebody that doesn't have that option in some of these big cities? Your parking area is your under the ground garage. It's your under your apartment. That's where you park, and the only place you can park within.
What if you don't have one of these and there's one parked next to you? Hey, Shannon, could you? Yeah, it's a park outside. I can't. Could you park it somewhere else?
Yeah, can you? Maybe outside, like you're supposed to.
Yeah, just not near my vehicle.
Yeah,
okay,
maybe that would be good. Oh boy, so yeah, pay attention to that. What year range was it?
2020 to 2024.
So the whole gamut of
Pretty
them,
much,
that's about
yeah.
when they started making them was
I think
2020, I think. So
500,000 of them.
Does it say the Hyundai Palisade too, or just the Kia Telluride?
It does not. But yeah, it does not say the Palisade.
That is interesting because they are really, really twins.
I wonder if
maybe that's coming yet. Maybe they didn't want to put it all out on the same day.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see if that is in there. You had some news
while
too.
you're looking that up. I've been camping on this news just for a little bit, but Chris, in your life, now I'm going to start asking you questions while I know you're looking up that whether it involves the other sister of the.
There's a type in Palisade recalls, you get plenty of replies, but I don't see that yet.
Hey, our Palisade State Park, just right outside of Sioux Falls, South Dakota,
right.
they're under the big expansion, and I was talking to the director, Luke, this morning. I saw him at the stop sign, and I'm going to announce the Jesse James Parade in Garrettson this coming weekend, and he had called me, and I hadn't called him back yet, so I figured, well, he's sitting along the street there. I'll just stop and talk to him. But they're parking campers. They're putting down the first lift of asphalt on the road out there. They've added on just a ton of spots. Just doubled the size of that park out there. So if you're local to the area, it opens up another spot for the avid campers around.
If you have a Palisade, you could park it outside at Palisade.
Just go pull a little camper and just park it out there. I'd be outside.
Not next to my tent, though, please.
Yes, please. Go somewhere else.
Right.
Well, Chris, in your life, did anything out there that you could find at all or no?
No, nothing on that.
In your life, have you ever had anything that you spent a lot of money on and then ended up deciding it was a bad idea and then never actually did it?
Drove it here today.
No, you did that. You did that.
No.
Is there something that, I'm sitting there as I say that to you, I'm thinking to myself, and there is definitely things that I've spent money on and said, not a good idea.
That's enough.
Yeah, I've went too deep on this. And usually it's a construction project that I start trying to do myself. And then I realize I can't do this. And then if I got to pay somebody to do it, I'm not going to do that.
I've learned a while ago when to not do that.
You know where your starting point?
Yeah.
Well, Apple, they've got a deep pocket.
Sure.
They've got an ability to do things. They've figured out how to do things. Would you say, Apple?
Sure.
Yeah, they've figured out a few things.
Yeah.
Well, they spent $1 billion a year to not make a car.
They have abandoned the Apple car idea.
Yeah, I'm reading from a March edition of Automotive News, and I've had this article here because it blew my mind when I read the top of the page article on Final Assembly. They called it Project Titan. And it cost the temp company about $1 billion a year. You know, some of the highlights of this story, Apple considered trying to buy Tesla when it was still worth less than $30 billion. But CEO Tim Cook killed the idea. It later met with Tesla CEO Elon Musk to discuss a collaboration, but that never went anywhere. They also talked to Mercedes-Benz for a few months about an idea to have Mercedes build the car and put Apple's self-driving platform into the Mercedes vehicle, but ultimately decided they wanted to build the car on its own. They also talked with BMW, Volkswagen, and Canoo, but Apple came close to reaching a deal with McLaren.
Okay.
Ford hired Project Titan chief Doug Field away from Apple in 2021, proposed selling Apple cars through its Lincoln brand, but that discussion ended after a preliminary meeting. Apple had wanted to charge $85,000 for its car, but internal estimates put the cost of production would be around $120,000 per car.
So
the company, you want to hear something else? The company bought the former Chrysler Proving Grounds in Arizona in 2021 in anticipation.
Wow.
And is now putting the property up for sale. So they even bought a proving grounds to prove the car that they never built.
Right.
That's next level. That is next level.
That's something I would do. I've done that. I like when we were looking at houses a long time ago, I got a good deal on a couch that would go perfect in the new house that we didn't buy. So I get that. The couch was great though. We ended up keeping the couch, but I've done that. That seems to be, that's something I would do is go, hey, once we have this car, we have to have a proving ground. We have to have a racetrack. So let's buy the racetrack while they're working on the car. Honey, that's what I would say.
We did that here in our Nordstrom's 2.0 when we built it, is that I wanted to have a small conference room, and I also wanted a large conference room to do training and meeting with our employees and occasionally let our industry groups use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start looking at conference room tables, they're really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
More than I would have imagined. I'd never looked at a big conference room table that you could set 16 people around or something like that.
Right.
So I saw on somewhere or heard on a radio or something that there was going to be save a ton of money, surplus sale at the Downtown Holiday Inn.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing a office equipment auction. And I thought, I'm going to check that out. Well, I went down there, and of course, in my zest for life, I had the date wrong and the time wrong.
Okay.
So when I got down there, they were already done.
Okay.
And so the guy that was there, Tom, I still know him to this day. He calls us for parts, and I talk to him every once in a while. I said, he goes, "It's over. We're loading things back up. We're moving on to the next town." I'm like, "Well, that's sad." I said, I need a bunch of chairs, and I need a conference room table. And I go, "You got anything?" And he says, "I got this one right here." He goes, "I really don't want to load it up." And had this big table, and I'm like, "Wow, that's a little bigger than I was thinking." I go, "What do you got for chairs?" He goes, "Well, I got these 18 chairs here. They're kind of all matched. They're really expensive office chairs. When you buy them new, they're like $500 a piece." And so we came to terms for like $2,500 for this huge table and these 18 chairs. And I bought them so he didn't have to load them in the truck.
Right.
And he was happy. And so we ended up realizing that the table was bigger than what I had planned. And so we had to make the room around the table. The sizing of the room became
changed.
I had to call up Derek and say, "Derek, I bought this table. You think we can get it in there?" And it took some reinventing of the walls. So that table in the Walt Nordstrom small conference room down the hallway isn't coming out of there anytime soon, unless it's in pieces.
Right.
Because the room was built around the table. But boy, I got a good deal on the table.
That is, the conference tables are a good example of they're expensive to get, and then you have it, and it's worth zero, except in that spot.
And we have now had a lot of automotive-related conversations around that table, so that brings me back to being relevant for the Under the Hood show.
Right.
Get your calls in, 866-594-4150, and we'll see if we can help you out with some automotive stuff.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood show.
Car feeling ill? Don't want to spread it to your wallet? Call the Motor Medics now for free advice.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood show. Let's talk to Frank in Rhode Island. Frank, you're on the Under the Hood show. What can we do for you?
Oh, thanks, guys. Really enjoy the program.
Thank you.
Okay, 2008 Chevy Cobalt, 2.2 liter, about 100,000 miles. The car runs fine. Something that you brought to my attention last week that I was curious about was I had an oxygen sensor that needed to be replaced. The maintenance light came on. The mechanic put the new sensor on, but the code didn't clear. And I remember last week you were saying that once, the oxygen sensor would go in, that the code would clear. They were able to get the trouble light off, but I had to drive the car over 100 miles, go back about 3 times for the code to clear in order for them to do emissions.
Okay, because you're in a state that has emissions testing for registration. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yep, and that's where a lot of states have that, and so some don't, and they're not familiar with that. That in a lot of places, we got people driving around all over the place with a check engine light on. We had the call earlier for a guy with a Toyota Camry, said it was running good, but he had a check engine light on for a 420 code, and these are things that are out there. But in your case, you have to get it fixed if you want to keep registering the car,
right?
And
exactly.
So with an oxygen sensor, it is not always immediately light goes off if that's the problem. And so it's got to be a certain number of drive cycles that will go through before it can sample enough times. It has to get to a certain engine temperature. There's things that have to happen on a lot of codes for them to clear out of the computer. So initially, after they put the oxygen sensor in, the mechanic didn't just clear that code, and did it come right back again? Is that what you're saying?
No, the light was off, but they weren't able to do the emissions because it was still basically in the system, the code. So I had to drive about 100 miles, go back a couple of times in order for them to do the emissions.
Well, I've never experienced what you're having to go through, and my naive opinion would have been if the light was off, somebody would look in and say, "Yep, they got it, let them go." But you're trying to say they scanned, they hooked to it, and they still saw the history code in there, and that also had to clear out of the computer.
I had before I moved down here, I had to get emissions tested, and yeah, they hooked up to the OBD2.
It makes sense that they wouldn't want people just right outside the gate clearing the code and then driving through and say, "Yep, we got it, buddy." That they would want to know that the problem was actually fixed. And so now that you've driven the car through those drive cycles, has it stayed off?
Oh yes, it stayed off, and after the second time, they rescanned it. It was still in there. About another 50 miles of driving, and then I was good to go. They were able to perform the emissions, and I guess the code, cleared itself.
The state inspectors didn't charge you for reading the code, did they?
No, sir. No,
but that is happening on a lot of that stuff. There is going to be a certain number of, there's criteria that have to be met on a drive cycle for it to say that, yep, this is good.
And that check engine light was just the first. If it was on, they wouldn't even go any further in our case.
Yeah, and that's good news for you, because we do have plenty of callers that have called us over the years where they go in and they get their code read. It says oxygen sensor. They put an oxygen sensor in, and it doesn't solve the problem, because the problem is a result. It's a symptom of another problem with the tune of the vehicle or the tune of the engine, or some factor that's causing it to show that result as an oxygen sensor. And so they've thrown a part at it and didn't actually solve the problem. But in your case, the aged oxygen sensor in the 2008 Cobalt was just what you needed, and it wasn't stuck in the pipe. You were able to get it out and change it, and now all is good. So I think we're going to call this a success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mileage has gone down, though, since they replaced the oxygen sensor. I'm not sure if it's just stop-and-go traffic, but about 4 miles to a gallon less in the city.
Well, if they really want to check into that, they're going to have somebody that can get in there and look check the fuel trims to see how it's running between lean and rich. And maybe that the sensor that you used, was that a genuine sensor from GM, or what did you use?
I think it was Bosch.
Okay, well they're the good name brand there too. But I have seen people put sensors in that are not of a good quality, and when they do that, I've seen it cause problems like that. But it might, if you want to take it to the next step, maybe do a good test of fuel economy. Make sure you're using a real similar driving set to what you would normally do for what you thought your fuel economy was, and really check that out, because temperature can affect it. Like you said, stop and go driving. There's so many things that can affect that fuel economy. The pace of the drive, whether you're going up hills, down hills, so many things can come into play. But if you feel like you've done a good study of your own fuel economy, you might bring it into somebody and have them check the fuel trims and just see what might be what might be causing that drop in fuel economy.
Frank, thanks very much for the call. Thanks for listening. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Carl. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Carl, what can we do for you?
Okay, got a 95 Ford F150 4x4. It's got the automatic transmission, which is giving me fits. It typically runs low on fluid, and I keep an eye on it, but a little history. The one time it quit running, had to have it towed home. It was low on fluid. I put fluid in it, and then it would run first and reverse just fine. But to go into second, I'd have to let my foot off the gas, and then it would jerk to shift into second, but it would never go into third or anything else. So
that's not good.
That's not good at all. No way around it. So I was thinking, well, I'll take a chance, drain the fluid, then filter, replace the filter. Maybe that would help. But I took it to a shop. I don't think they really tested it or anything, because they said, yeah, you need a transmission. But if it's driving, then maybe it could be fixed.
Well,
or something,
I guess we got just a little time here, but did you ever figure out where the fluid was going that you were having to replace?
No, I haven't, because, the air going down below when you're driving kind of blows it all over. I haven't really found where it's
if you have
leaking.
an external leak and you're adding fluid, at least we know where the fluid is at, and it's not like a cooler that's cracked and it's getting into the cooling system or something like that. But if you're having an external leak, it could be the result of a a bushing and a seal on your front torque converter, the pump seal as they call it. And sometimes that's the result of wear in that pump where it's just not working correctly. The shop that did the flush of the fluid, they're probably noticed, I'm going to guess, I'm not there obviously, but they probably noticed some really bad fluid when they flushed it, and that's probably why they told you without much testing that they're concerned about the transmission. Because if that fluid is discolored, stinky, they know there was clutches slipping, and a lot of times they won't always hold a gear or go to the next gear if there's slippage. Now, if that fluid was still not burned up, still not slippery, then you could have things going on. There could be something in the valve body. It could be something with the park reverse neutral sensor. There's things that could do that.
But just listening to his symptoms, it sounds like...
It sounds a little chronic to me, but if you wanted a real opinion, for sure, I would bring it to a transmission-only shop and let them take a look at it, and they might specialize enough where they could tell you exactly what's going on.
And then they'll put in a new transmission.
Newer Remander, or maybe a quality used one if you can find one for that, but look for options that way.
Carl, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Also, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can watch the show there and you can subscribe. And we want to thank a couple of our sponsors.
Yeah, we've got United Technical Institute, UTI.edu. Yeah, Universal Technical Institute, UTI.edu. Thank you for covering me on that. It slips out wrong every once in a while from my mouth.
Sure.
And they are the place to go for automotive training. And they've got welding programs. They've got marine programs. They are the place to go. Yes. And if you've got a chance to check out their campuses, you'll find them in great locations and appreciate them. And they are friends of the Under the Hood Show.
I bet they've bought a lot of tables over the years.
I bet you they have a lot of tables and chairs there.
Yeah.
At UTI.
For sure.
Check out UTI and our friends also at Berkeley One Classics, berkeleyclassics.com. They're celebrating 50 years, and so we're happy to have them on as a partner. And occasionally you'll hear us do the Berkeley Challenge to find out what car it might be if we think it's a good Berkeley Classic collector car question.
What color it is.
It's always fun. Guess the color contest, so that's always fun. So thanks for those partners being part of the show.
866-594-4150. Let's go to Mississippi and talk to Andrew. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Andrew, what can we do for you?
Yes, sir. I had a question. I'm working on a 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner, and I'm just now getting into cars. I don't know how the stall works on the torque converters, like a 2400 stall or 2800, and lockup or non-lockup. Like, what does all that mean?
Well, I got to ask you a couple other questions first.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to dig in here just a little bit, Andrew. You haven't worked on a lot of cars. You're learning,
No.
which we can all learn together, which I love. But how does it end up being that the first one is a 69 Plymouth Roadrunner?
Right. Why not
what's the story here?
Okay. I am 50 years old. I've had this car since I was 14. But okay, I'm blind. I will never drive it. Never seen it. But I'm just want to get it going with my kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I knew there was a little more to unpack here than
Right.
just a simple question that you asked. And so,
Yeah.
have you bought the
My
car?
dad,
Or your dad? There you
my
go,
dad
family.
bought it for me. My dad bought it for me because I was like, it was a chance of me getting my eyesight back, and it was a father-son thing.
So was the car? There again, I'm going to ask a few more questions here. So when the car was bought, was the car like a really nice one, or was it a project? Or
Yeah, it was beautiful. Originally it was a 383 car. Right now, I'm kind of in between what motor to put back in it. There's no motor in it right now at all.
Okay.
So who did drive it then?
My dad. Well, actually, I sit behind the wheel. My dad steered, and we had fun.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. My goodness here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on a torque converter stall, what they're talking about is how many RPMs you would basically get the engine to go up to before the torque converter engages, because there's moving gears inside there, the torque converter, and they're meshing gears, and they can engineer and build that in such a way so that at a certain point of RPMs is when it locks in and when it starts putting the force into the front pump. So basically, you're going to be at a higher RPM before it engages. And a lot of times you'll see that in performance, where they want to get those RPMs up and get into the power band and then bring it into the gears as it's coming. So they can build those torque converters. It's kind of an amazing little operation how they make them inside of there with the vanes and the gears, and you see cutaways on them.
Okay.
You know, if you had that opportunity, you can just see that there is just an amazing amount of
It's insanity.
fluid pressure going on inside there, and
So a lower number would be like more of a street car then.
yeah, if you had a typical stall, it would be way less than that 3,000 stall, and it would just be for more drivability on the street. The higher numbers are more for performance and strip racing and things like that to really get that thing taken off and going from the stoplight or the drag strip.
Okay, what's the lockup and non-lockup? How does that?
Well, when you get into the newer vehicles, what they used to do is what they do now is they lock up the torque converter so there's less moving mass inside the torque converter as you get up to speed, so that it helps with fuel economy. You're not moving all those gears inside of that torque converter and the vanes, so you're able to have that whole mass once you get going to help with centrifugal force and kind of just help the turn of the engine. And so then as you slow down, either applying the brake pedals and the switch gets clicked, or sometimes they're under pressure, then they will just release and let those gears freewheel again, kind of like your 10-speed bike as you're coming to a stop. And that way then the engine can idle down and get back to its idling RPMs. And when that system doesn't work right, a lot of times it can be bad enough it'll kill the engine because it's not able to release those gears as it slows down inside that torque converter.
Okay, so for a normal street car, like you'll put your daughter behind the wheel, a non-lockup would be better?
Well, with the age of that car, the different options that are available, I would just ask them to say, hey, I would just ask the expert, I want a very streetable car. This is a car that we're going to drive, and they would give you the recommendation, which they think is the best. If you're not overly concerned about the fuel economy, because that car is not going to be a super fuel efficient car anyway. I would say less is more, and just stick with more of your standard stall torque converter, and not have another complication in there. Because I don't think in '69 that I don't know enough probably, but I don't think a lockup was an option then. That didn't really start coming in.
Y'all want to take a guess on the color?
Well, I didn't know if I should ask you or not. Chris and I were looking at each other having
I know the color.
You've been told.
Yeah, right.
All right, so 69 Plymouth Roadrunner. I'm 2 for 2 today. I'm afraid I'm going to lose on this one, but I'm going to say it is orange.
That's what
Chris, what are you going to say?
I'll go with yellow.
Okay. Where are we at, Andrew?
It's petty blue.
Petty blue. Oh, I love it. That's that's one of my favorites.
That is,
It's inspired by the King.
That's right.
And,
I love y'all's radio show.
Thanks, Andrew.
What part of Mississippi are you from?
Vicksburg. It's right on the river.
Okay.
I was born on that river. I was born on the banks of that river. That's one of my favorite things. That's one of my favorite facts about me. I was born on the banks of the Mississippi in a hospital, but it's right on the banks of the Mississippi. Yeah, see,
you've always got a way to pull it around, don't you?
Yeah. Andrew, thanks very much for the call.
Thank you.
That's awesome. That's also what I did. I got a project car for me and my son that I just took. I think I was convincing my wife that it was a project car for the two of us when it wasn't.
Him and Dad must have went for some pretty good rides if it got to the point where they had to pull the engine and replace it. Those rides got pretty aggressive. I think I like Dad.
I bet. Yeah.
Many of us rode on our parents' laps to learn to drive and those sort of things, but I don't think we ever blew an engine up.
That'd be that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Bill. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Bill, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I got a 2019 GMC Yukon that the brakes squeal all the time, but when I take it in to have them looked at, I'm told that my pads and rotors look fantastic.
this can be frustrating, and they're not wrong,
right?
The brakes and stuff can look fantastic. Do you know what brake pads and such they've put on there?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Okay, because sometimes the pads and choices that get made are some very good stuff, but if in certain climates, if they get a little too much metallic in them, that metallic can get a little oxidization to it when the air is moist, and it will rub against, those metallic particles are just enough to create noise as they rub across that brake rotor. And we've had people that have went to more basic brake pads that might wear a little bit quicker sometimes, but they don't have as much metallic in them to get rid of that noise. That's assuming that all the brake hardware is in good condition. Are you able to tell if the noise is coming from the front or the rear?
It's coming from the front.
Yeah, they would want to maybe just inspect everything again to make sure all that brake hardware is correct. Yep. The calipers are sliding nice. Make sure that there's not a brake shield or something that's gotten out of whack. Those are the simple things. But more than likely, it's just I've had this on my own vehicles. It's just the composition of that brake pad in a hot, humid, or a moist climate. They can get noisy, and it's just hard to get rid of it sometimes. Sometimes they can get glazed over a little bit, and you just got to start again. But that is frustrating, and
it's all the time. Yep. It doesn't ever go away.
Well, it'll go away every now and then, but it's typically, under hard braking, it doesn't do it at all. But it's, when you're just kind of rolling up to the stop sign and you're not even on the gas and you're just kind of tapping the brake to slow down, you just, you're like, this is a nice looking vehicle and the brakes sound terrible.
And it's enough to get people looking at your car.
Yeah, I've got a daughter.
Absolutely.
I've got a daughter that has a 19 Sentra, and the brakes squeak on that car, and we've looked at them a few times, and soon we're just going to have to put some different brake material on there.
Yeah, that is one which might not, whether to go higher quality or a little step down.
I've heard Russ many times tell people you go just a little bit lower quality.
Right.
You lose some of the metallic out of there. You don't get into a ceramic because you're not going to spend a bunch of money on something that doesn't make any sense for a passenger vehicle. And you just realize that, hey, I'm not a super aggressive driver. Let's just use a little lower grade pad. And then a lot of times those noises will go away.
After you do a hard stop and it doesn't squeak, does it pick right up again at the next corner?
Yeah, it picks right up again at the next corner.
Yeah,
it could be that the rotors have gotten those pads glazed over a little bit, and then there's just some embedded, metallic in there, and so maybe it's just even a new brake job, and then reburnish in those brakes again right afterwards to get it set right. And it's hard when that happens, and they're not wrong in saying that the pads look good.
Right. Bill, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you.
Prepare to learn something. You're going Under the Hood.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Question that came in on the chat. 2007 Ford Mustang GT 4.6 has 157,000 miles. What is that? That's an 18-year-old car. When should the timing chains need to be replaced?
When they built that engine, I think their plan is that never.
Right.
But it's an internally lubricated, enclosed system. But what they've learned...
That's the goal on timing chains, right? Is that they never...
What they've learned is that for some, with the oil change intervals that we use, the things that happen, those chains can stretch.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the chains, they're designed to last the entire life of the engine. And that is true, because when the timing chains go...
The engine's usually done. Yeah. But there's also phasers on there that help adjust the valve timing for fuel efficiency. And if the car's been well cared for and had regular oil changes with quality oil, stored well, there's a really good chance that those chains in that particular car are still in really good shape. If it's holding good oil pressure and it isn't making any noises, sometimes you can have an audible noise that just a little bit of a rumble that can come from a chain that's slacking a little bit. And I don't know that exact model. I know that the pickups, the guys can pull the inspection covers and they can kind of see, how much tension is on that chain and give it a little bit of a physical inspection to decide whether or not they want to go into that or not. Right. But there's also companies that make the lockout kits for the phasers if they start getting to be where they're wearing because of oil pressure in the engine. There'd be more to know if the car is really healthy. If the car is really healthy and it's been well maintained and oiled, I would not break into it unless you knew that it was making a little bit of noise or it was having some performance issues, or if upon inspection they could say, yeah, we're seeing some pretty good deflection on this chain, it's probably time to get it replaced. Otherwise, I don't think I'd get overly shook up about it.
When I had the timing chain issue on my car, it sounded like a chain. I mean, I remember them saying, you hear that, that's your timing chain.
Well, if you can imagine the low noise of an idling chainsaw, if you can imagine that as the chain rolls across the bar, sometimes you get that's the type of noise that you'll hear graduated a little bit from a timing chain sometimes.
Right.
Now, we have vehicles that are on the record for known for timing chain stretching. And so if you have one of those vehicles, then we tell people, if you start having a little bit of issue here, you're going to get some tuning issues, this sort of thing. We got to get a chain in that. I just don't look at this car as one of those. I've seen them with a lot of miles on them. But if it has been ran hard, maybe the oil changes haven't been perfect, then I'd say let's be a little closer on that inspection on that. But,
and your goal as to what you want.
What's that?
Your goal as to what you want out of it from that 157,000
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to keep this thing for another 100,000 miles, then you probably need to budget for it at some point. But you can do some inspections and find out.
Here's one Steven wants to know. He has the question is, on the 2024 Chevy Trax, do you have any knowledge of the 1.2 liter turbo 3-cylinder? Have you heard anything about that engine on the 24 Chevy Trax?
Good little engine. We haven't had enough experience with it to see long-term, obviously, but like a lot of these small turbo engines, they work hard. They produce a lot of power. It moves that thing along really nice. Good fuel economy because the way they built it with the turbo and the small displacement. But I would definitely be on top of my oil changes, probably a little better than the factory.
Okay.
And a lot of those little turbo engines, too, you want to look at the maintenance guide. They will often have you putting spark plugs in them sooner than you would think, is something that a lot of people don't realize. So you want to check on that. And then also, we would always recommend giving that engine a little bit more octane in the fuel with that little turbo. Not that you have to go put premium in it all the time, but I would not be afraid, and I would recommend using an E15. You'll see that on the pumps in our area, like the 88 octane is most of the time going to be your E15, E10. I would use that in there, and I would definitely let that thing have just a little bit more than your normal 87 octane, because I just think it's going to help it find its sweet spot in the computer a little bit better, and it's just going to run better, and it's going to help that engine be a little healthier with just a little bit more octane. If you wanted to spend the money for premium, you could, but then I think you're just going too far. But just that little bit of extra octane is a good thing for that engine.
866-594-4150. Scott wants to know best way to fix a stripped oil pan drain plug on an 88 F-150 4x4.
Well, on a lot of those, that happened. And if you can, I know, like we just had my friend brought one up to our shop. I don't know if he got them in or not. They were busy on the schedule. But sometimes they end up welding a nut on there. There's sometimes they've got to drill into it and get it out. And then you can get a repair kit from your local parts store. And they make the oil pan repair kits that you can get to sometimes put they'll tap it out a little bit and put an oversized plug in there and still be in the meaty part of the pan where the plug is at. Most any brand, they're going to have a repair kit available. But the trick a lot of times is just getting the old one out. If it's been cross-threaded or if they've just ran the wrong wrench on it for too many years, or if it's just had too many oil changes and it's just worn out. So it's always a good idea if you've been running a vehicle for a long time and you're noticing that plug is getting a little rounded on the edges on the bolt, get a new one before it's too late. It's cheap.
Yeah.
Cheap medicine. Buy yourself a new one and get it on there before you have this problem. That's definitely a recommendation I would give.
Do you guys see any difference? I was thinking about this the other day with the weather. Our weather for the last few months, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but our weather the last, I'll say 2 months, has been about perfect. Where we are, we've gotten rain at the right time. Temperatures haven't been crazy either way. It's just been a pretty steady, normal period of months. Do you think that's accurate? Wouldn't you say? I mean,
other than stupid wind,
the wind is.
Yeah,
I can't even.
So I mean, there's a lot of debris in the air for cabin air filters and engine air filters.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be aware of that. We've had dust blowing around, and you get in some of these construction areas you drive through when you can physically see, and it looks like a snowstorm or a dust storm or a dirty 30s because it's just so much wind.
Yeah.
Definitely got to be paying attention to your air intake filters and your cabin air filters and things like that. That'd be an abnormal to our where we're living at least.
Yeah. Does that make does the weather when it's good do we notice that in our cars that if it's not super hot they just don't have the issue, or if it's not super cold, you know what I mean?
Well, I think the vehicles are engineered so well to work through all those conditions. It becomes a lot more on the accessories. You know, the air conditioning systems are forced to get into play right now because our humidities have popped up on occasional days around here. Other parts of the world, they've been dealing with crazy heat right now, and so that air conditioning system is definitely getting taxed. You want to make sure that the condensers are clean, the airflow on the front of that engine is good all the way through the grills. If you have a lower air deflector that's meant to bring air up into the engine and it's broke off, get that baby replaced so you get the right airflow up into that engine. You just can't take any risks. This stuff is so easily broken if it's not kept within the factory specs. I get more worried about the accessories and things like that. Now, super cold, the fluid's not flowing. You can have excess wear, but usually in the heat, at least your oils are running, things are moving, but you don't want to be overheating things. But that's something that I don't think we've gotten quite there yet. But boy, I've been talking to a lot of people about air conditioning, and that is the biggest culprit that people don't pay attention to, is just making sure that you got that airflow. There's not dirt built up in between the condenser and the radiator.
And that is something that if you don't stay on top of, or if you just don't check it, you can be past the point of no return before you know it.
And most vehicles, they've engineered pretty well, so things get deflected towards it, but not right into it.
Right.
So the air can get into it. But boy, there's plenty of them that have bugorama, the 6-foot butterfly laying across it, or that's a big butterfly.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just look at them, it's like, oh my gosh, there's no way that thing can breathe. Or the coils have been beat so much over the years on older cars that they're bent over. They actually do make combs that you run through the condenser to comb those fins open so that the airflow can get through. Because it's not just going to affect the air conditioning system because it won't be able to bring the head temperature down on that compressor. It's also not allowing proper airflow in through the radiator for the cooling of the engine. And so as we get into these warmer months ahead, that's a simple thing you can do just to make sure you've got good airflow through the coolers on the front, up from the bottom side. If there's vents, make sure none of that stuff is blocked by a vanity license plate somebody threw on there or something.
Right.
Just make sure you have all the airflows open, because that airflow is imperative to things working the way they're supposed to.
That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturdivant's. All right. Well, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
I don't think we need much after show today.
The after show is just going to be an exhale.
Mm-hmm.
It's always easier when we do the show with the three of us.
Yeah.
And, it's there's some of these questions I felt right at home on, and there's a few of them that I wish I could have tapped off to my partner, Russ, but he's off doing a project that he needs to get done, and we're happy to support him as he supported us through our...
I'm not.
You're not?
No, I wish you were here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think... No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I mean, we all have had our things. I was gone for a couple weeks, and so we appreciate when we all can be together. And next week, we're going to be able to do that, right?
I think so, yeah.
God willing?
Yeah. I you mentioned the wind, and I was able finally... I talk about the wind when my family asks me things, how's it going? The wind. I say the wind, I get now why the wind drives people crazy. Because it's maddening when the wind is blowing constantly, and I remember one time golfing with my brother down here, and he was like, how do you golf down here with the wind? And I was like, well, when it's windy. He's like, no, I mean this wind. And I was like, oh, this
is nice.
This
today.
isn't wind. Oh, I didn't even notice. And he came down. He has a brand new, I don't know if it's brand new, but new to him, an Equinox. And they came down for a weekend, and it was the first time that he had to deal with the wind the way that we deal with the wind. So he was coming across I-90 East-West Road, and it took him longer to get here, and the mileage, they noticed the mileage.
Because they were pushing that wind.
Yeah, and on the way home the next day or 2 days later, it was equally windy, and he called me. He actually texted me and said, I apologize for ever doubting you when you talk about the wind being a factor, because our trip was shorter, and we used way less gas on the way home because we had a 40-mile-an-hour wind at our back. And it wasn't a gusty wind. It was also a gusty wind, but it was like a steady 40. Just that was that weekend that was just insane.
Well, and that's why we talk about people towing too, because when you're pulling a camper or a trailer and you got a hard side wind on you or you're bucking a front wind, that's where that towing capacity needs that give. If you're right up to the max already, and then all of a sudden you start pushing a 30-mile-an-hour, 40-mile-an-hour wind, you're putting a lot of strain on that vehicle.
For sure.
And so that's why we always look at the recommendations. They say stay within 80% of that. It gives you that wiggle room for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, I don't think it was a great job, but it was adequate.
We had our challenges today too.
Yeah.
Starting off, without Russ, there were certain things that we had to do that we don't normally do. It was fun at the beginning, huh? That was interesting.
Well, I told you I'd be up here early, which you didn't believe me when I said it anyway.
No, you were here before.
But I walked into kind of a little bit of everything okay? No.
Nope. And then all of a sudden that was
You know why?
Because
I walked in.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and miracles happened right as I walked in.
Exactly.
Russ was
Lights
texting.
came on.
Russ was texting and trying to tell you it's right here, and it was kind of right there.
It was like you had the proximity key. It was like I was in the car waiting, and the lights weren't going on, and then you walked by, and all of a sudden
I had the fob.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, that'll do it for the Under the Hood show. Thank you so much, everybody. Make sure to, if you're watching on Facebook right now, click the bell. Or not the bell, click like even. Just do that, and then you start with that, or hit subscribe.
Some signs of life. Give us signs of life.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.